Hello there, Nate here with the Volunteer Tech Vlog on the Live Sound 101 YouTube channel. And it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I recorded one of these. Going down to one video per week. Not quite as frequent, but today is a good day to record because we've got some rainy weather here. Might turn to snow later on, but it's not sunny. So on my morning commute, should actually have some halfway decent lighting. And by halfway decent, I mean halfway decent when you're talking about cars, recording videos in cars. Like normally, if I record a video on my way to work, this time of the year, the sun will be rising in the background. So the video will be pretty awful because of the lighting. But I don't really care because I'm just casually chatting about live sound and church tech and pro audio video type stuff. And so this video I'm going to talk about the Yamaha TF5. We're talking about the Yamaha a lot lately, and we just went live with it actually last week. Did we go live with it last week? I can't even remember now. It might have been 2 weeks ago, but we just recently went live. And I've done a handful of videos so far, like my first impressions about it, you know, prepping for the install. I've talked about actually doing the install, talked about the board being fully operational. And so now that the board is up and running, so it had been up in kind of like what I would call a test lab, where Josh had it set up in a upstairs office. And he was kind of configuring it and making sure it could do what we thought it could do, so we could have a smooth transition. So we got the thing all configured and set up and really spent some time kicking the tires. And so at this point in time, he is like the in-house Yamaha TF5 expert. So last night, I had my first official rehearsal. It was a Thursday night. I had my first official rehearsal with the TF5. Where I actually probably logged 2 or 3 hours with the board and with the app. And I was mainly focused on using the iPad app and learning the ins and outs of the iPad app for the TF5. But I did spend a little bit of time actually behind the board, but very, very minimal. I think I probably spent 80% of my time on the iPad and maybe 20% physically sitting behind the console. And I am in the midst of that learning curve, you know. I think I mentioned before, I'm at the point. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts about using the TF5 as I'm learning it. And I think I shared before that I'm at the point where my ears know what I want to happen, but actually doing that with my fingers and fumbling through the menus and everything is it's still clunky. So I haven't quite mastered the interface yet, and that's something that I have to work on. But it's getting better. It's definitely getting better. I learned how to set up. Oh geez, now I gotta remember the terminology. I can't even. I'm trying to think of like what some of these terms are, but one of the huge light bulb moments for me was when I was on the iPad mixing on the floor. One of the things that just took a long time for me was the fact that when you're looking at the iPad, you can pretty much only see 8 channels at a time, a bank of 8, which makes sense. So we've got our channels plugged in everywhere, and so you've got to scroll left and scroll right to get to things you want to mix. Well, you can go up in the upper left hand corner and click on utility, and you can basically make a custom fader bank. And I learned how to do that, and I was like, yes, you know, because we had 32 channels there on the main mix, and by default, and I only really needed to use 8 for rehearsal. And so just to group all those 8 together and put them in whatever order you want is amazing. So that was a big thing. Definitely more comfortable with navigating between front of house, aux 1, aux 2, aux 3, and the different mixes now. It's pretty much after after my second time using the iPad app, it's pretty much second nature now. Like, I don't have to, like, the first time you look at that app, it's intimidating. You're like, wait, how do I get to where? But so now that I've logged about 2 or 3 hours with the board, definitely I'm liking it. I'm definitely liking it. It's going to be easy to bounce around. Yeah, it's good. I mean, there's still so I will say this, the one of the big challenges I think I'm gonna be faced up against right now is the fact that the iPad app is limited. So it's a different version of the Yamaha TF5 menu options and navigation. It's not the same. So there's basically 3 interfaces you have to learn. We don't have to. I mean, you can just pick. I suppose you could just always, if your room was set up in such a way that you could just stay behind the board, then I would just say stay behind the board. But the whole reason we bought the TF5 was so we could mix remotely, or that was one of the main reasons. So I've got 2 interfaces I definitely have to learn. The physical board interface, where there's like a touchscreen menu, which is set up slightly different. Look, there's a lot of things that look the same, but it is different than the app. The app is a different interface and has different limitations. So it's not like you learn how to navigate the interface on the actual physical console, the little touch screen in the center of the dashboard. That's one thing. And then the app is something that looks very similar, but is structured slightly differently. So there's 2 interfaces you really have to learn. Now, that was a misconception on my part. I thought, from the literature I read or from just talking with Josh, I thought the interface was the same on the board, on the app, and on the laptop. And what we're finding is the app on a laptop is much more functional or feature rich. I think you can do anything on the laptop that you can sitting behind the board, but it looks different. The menus are structured slightly differently, and it's not exactly the same. But all the functionality and features are there. So you have your 2 fully functional, feature-rich options, which are the laptop and the actual TF5 console, and then you've got the app, which is, I guess what I'd call a lightweight version. It lets you do all the real important things that you want to do remotely, but it doesn't let you do everything remotely. And so there are essentially 3 interfaces you need to learn to navigate. And so I'm kind of in the middle there, kind of feeling the pain of, oh man, I gotta learn all these different interfaces. So, but again, I've only logged like 3 hours with the board, so we'll just call it 3 hours, because I was listening for a good amount of that time too. But I guess I was actually there for 3 hours, so let's just call it 3 hours. So that's where I'm at. I'm feeling real comfortable with the iPad app. I'm feeling real comfortable with all the major things I need to do behind the physical board, in terms of, hey, let me switch over to this mix and adjust something, let me switch over to that mix and adjust something, let me switch. So it's real easy to hop between the mixes and everything like that. Actually, and then navigating to like compression and EQ. Actually, I'm a little bit slow at that behind the actual board. I'm a little better to navigate between compression, EQ, and those like channel settings on the actual app. But overall, I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a huge improvement from what we had. But anyway, well, right now I'm in that little time frame where it's kind of I don't know what you want to call it, stressful. You're just like, oh, I gotta learn this new thing. I gotta learn it as fast as I can. So that's why I'm vlogging about it, because that's real life, you know. I used to think you know, a good audio engineer, you could just like, you know, plop him behind any device, and if he was good, within like, you know, 15 minutes he could have the mix sounding great, because he just knew every single interface and he knew how to navigate. And you know, maybe at one point in time when the world was analog, things were structured in such a way where that was you know, maybe achievable, maybe more or less, because you have your inline console, and you know, how different can you make an inline console? I mean, you've got the same sections everywhere. You've got your preamp or your head amp section. You've got your routing section. You've got your aux sends. You've got your EQ, compression, you know, and so on and so forth. So there's only so many things. But when you get into the digital realm, when you get into software, there's a lot of different paradigms you can go down. There's a lot of different ways that you can set up your menu, and they're not necessarily obvious. I mean, there's things that you just have to know. Okay, if I'm on this screen and I swipe this way, I can get to that. Or if I'm on this screen and I swipe up and down, I can get to this special thing. And there's, so that's basically the biggest, I think, learning curve, is just learning all these little, oh, you got to swipe left to get to that from here, and you swipe up to get to that from here, and you just click somewhere over here in the left, and it doesn't really look like a button, but it is. You just have to know to kind of click there. So there's all that kind of fun stuff happening. Let's see, what else? Oh, virtual sound check. I gotta talk about actually, I should title this video Virtual Sound Check. You know, so I had my first ever experience with a multi-track virtual sound check last night, and that I probably should have opened the video with that. So now I'm 11 minutes in. I'm just getting to like the meat and potatoes and like the really good stuff. So I'm sitting there mixing and, you know, getting the monitors set for the musicians, and I'm telling them, I'm like, hey guys, I feel like a baby here learning to crawl. We have this awesome new tool, and this is my first time using it, so bear with me. When you want a little more of you in the monitors, it's gonna take me an extra minute and a half to probably do that. But they understand, you know. Pete was very understanding. He's like, no, this is what we got to do. It's going to be great. We're going to have to work through it, so take your time, and we'll be here a little bit later, but that's okay. So that was nice to kind of have everybody in the band kind of understanding the situation, and, you know, realizing that this is going to take a little bit of time. And, you know, I was telling them, hey, if the mix doesn't sound amazing, it's not because, you know, if you're looking at what I'm doing out in the room right now, I'm really just trying to make sure levels can be heard. Like, you can hear everything. I'm really not diving deep down and, you know, like really considering, maybe I should change the knee of that compressor, or maybe the ratio should be changed from, you know, 3:1 to 4 to, you know, I'm not quite there yet. I'm just learning. I'm learning how to crawl. Like I said, I'm learning how to navigate the menus, do all that stuff. I want to learn how to do that first, and then I can dive in with the pinpoint accuracy. So I told Pete, the mix is going to be the mix. It'll be okay for Sunday. People will be able to hear, but it might not be my best work because I'm still learning. So that's kind of the expectation that was set, and I feel like that's healthy to just be like, hey, we're all learning. This is a new thing. It's gonna take a few stabs at it before it sounds awesome. But we did the virtual sound check, and so Josh, luckily for me, Josh was there. Thank you, Josh. And I preferred that he be there, because I honestly, I feel like I want to be the most effective, most efficient using this new tool. So rather than me just try to figure it out on my own, having a buddy there that's already spent a few months kicking the tires to say, oh yeah, if you want to do that, you just click on here and click there. I'm like, oh, okay, gotcha. So that was super helpful for having Josh for some of the inner workings and functionality. But so with that, so he one of the things he's set up is Nuendo Live. So as we're doing, you know, our rehearsal, it's super easy to pull up a session in Nuendo and just arm all the tracks, press record, and off we go. And so we were recording, and we got to do the virtual sound check. So the musicians unplugged, and they sat down out in the room, and, you know, chit-chatting, and with really the push of essentially 2 buttons. So what do? We switched the console's input from the head amps to all USB. So we're connected to the workstation, the digital audio workstation PC via USB. So that's where all the recording's going over. And hang on a second. I got a real slow truck. Got to get around. So we got everything being recorded, and so the band took a break, stopped the recording, looked at the regions, saw like basically where the last song occurred, set the cursor to loop that last song, and then we switched the inputs from the head amp inputs to the USB inputs. So basically that looping section from Nuendo was being played right back on the board. And that was the first time I ever actually experienced that, and it was amazing. It was awesome to be able to have exactly the same settings on every channel strip, every channel, and to be able to take the monitors completely out, so completely mute any signal that was going through the monitors. So we're just hearing the main, and you can really start to wrap your head around the value of a virtual sound check, is the band's out there listening. And the other thing I was made aware of too is you got to be very careful about that solo button when you're sitting out there with all the members of the band. And it's something to be aware of, to be very careful when you're soloing something, because you don't want to, if somebody hits a wrong note or something like that, it's just, as a musician, it's jarring to hear yourself if you've never been in that situation. So we've got volunteer musicians that have really never been in that situation before, and so it's, I don't know, it's just something to be aware of, is just be very strategic about when you solo something in a crowd of people that are kind of in the critiquing mode. But what it allows the musicians to actually listen to the mix and say, oh, okay, let me adjust my tone so I sound this way, or let me do this a little differently, or let me do that a little differently, or yeah, let's get a little bit of reverb in there for the backup vocals, or whatever you want to do. And I'm personally excited about it because I could come in like at night when nobody's around, and I can work on crafting a mix. I can work on trying to get the room to sound really, really good, and dial in some real technical settings that I might not have time to do while the band is up there. I can really start to improve my skills as somebody who's mixing. So this the virtual sound check is a very powerful tool. I guess to put it simply, it's a very powerful tool, but it also has this with that, with great power comes great responsibility thing. It's also very easy to well, what am I trying to say? So I feel like just as much as you can solo maybe somebody hitting a wrong note and it really stands out and you're like, oh, what are you doing up there? I feel like the virtual sound check, the person mixing, the live sound engineer, also has a little bit of that too, because everybody's coming back and critiquing the mix and saying, everybody's gonna say, well, I don't like this about the mix and I don't like that. And so now I'm open. It's almost like I have to almost be ready to defend my mix decisions. And that didn't come up last night at all. But it's just one of the things that my eyes were kind of open to before, where when it's just live and it happens, it's real hard for somebody to say, hey, I mean, usually they'd say it was yeah, they'd cough in your face. No, they would say, oh, it's too loud or whatever. But now, if they can actually go back and listen to it, they can say it's too loud. They can actually measure it in the room, and they can say, oh, and by the way, why are you processing the guitars like this? You should do it this way, or So it kind of opens the door for critique. So I think that might be something it's just important to be aware of that, so there's no hurt feelings, and expectations are managed properly and appropriately. So virtual sound check was awesome. overall, I think the rehearsal went really, really well. There were a couple little things that, you know, didn't come quite as quickly to me, but we're starting to have some big shifts in the way we think about sound, which is exciting, and I'm glad about that, because with the virtual sound check now, rather than me just say, hey, you know, when the monitors are too loud, it sounds really muddy out in the room, like that, it's really hard to explain that to somebody. They're just like, well, that's just whatever. But when you hear the difference, it's like night and day. It's like, oh, that's what you mean. Oh yeah, let's turn the monitors down. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the first time using the TF5. I thought it was great. Thought it was awesome. Still got a lot to learn, but things are going well. So that'll about do it for this windbag session here as I'm driving. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I will see you in the next video.